Antonio Brown is showing us the future of sports. And it's not with his rapping. It actually has to do with sports media and sports journalism. But the funny thing is that Antonio Brown isn't actually doing anything new. He's using the same playbook that some of the most prominent media figures and companies are using, like Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless, and Barstool. And it's genius. Now, before we get into how AB is showing us the future of sports media and how he's using the same tactics prominent media figures like Stephen A. Smith use, we first need to understand how we got here. And pay attention because I'm going to go over this as briefly as possible to get to the juicy parts of this video. You see, it all started because Antonio Brown decided to make a podcast called CTE Podcast with Chandler Jones. He also decided to create a Twitter account called CTE ESPN. Now, first up, I gotta say, as crazy as Antonio Brown is, and as wild as he can be, he is an incredible marketer. Like, no one would think of the name CT ESPN. You see, at first, no one thought that CT ESPN would be of any relevance. Besides, just Antonio Brown tweeting memes and tweeting some BS stuff like crackers, which is important. You gotta remember that because it'll get really important later on. But the thing is, Antonio Brown actually broke some news recently. Antonio Brown broke the Russell Wilson to Pittsburgh Steelers news 2 days before it was reported by Adam Schefter and all the other people there. And while this isn't really shocking, to be honest, I mean, I'm sure Antonio Brown has a lot of sources. I'm sure he even asked Russ to join his arena football team. It is kind of funny the reaction the media had to this, specifically Adam Schefter. So what usually happens when someone breaks the news and someone else reports on it is that they usually give credit to that person. So if Adam Schefter tweets saying that Russell Wilson went to Pittsburgh, he should credit Antonio Brown. But that just didn't happen whatsoever. And Antonio Brown was slightly pissed by this. And that's why he DM'd Adam Schefter to ask why he didn't get any credit. But the thing is, that doesn't really matter at the end of the day because Antonio Brown got what he wanted. He got attention and he got some credibility to the point where when he tweets something, people won't just immediately disregard it. And that's why he's tweeted random stuff now, like saying the Bears will trade the #1 overall pick and keep Justin Fields, talking about some Justin Jefferson trade that just never happened. Now, whether or not Antonio Brown actually knows what he's talking about is one thing, but I think we can all agree on is that Antonio Brown is an incredible marketer for as crazy as he can be. And the strategy that he's using all has to do with one thing that so many prominent media figures and companies like Stephen A. Smith and Barstool have realized. And it's the one big change that's happening in sports media. The thing is, like, people like Stephen A. Smith and Barstool, they first started out talking mostly about sports.
Play who shows up in big moments.
Although that is a bit less true for Barstool. But over the years, they realized in-depth, accurate analysis on matchups, player breakdowns, and plays doesn't have as big of a general audience as compared to just talking about drama and debates and just being over the top and really acting and exaggerating.
I have to say the obvious, Max. Stay off the weed!
And that's what led to the modern debate show. However, while that's been happening for quite a while now, I will say that there's one change that I don't think people have really recognized that's happening right now. You see, the thing is, it's no longer good enough to just talk about sports in an over-the-top dramatic way. A lot of these prominent media figures are now trying to make sure that they expand their brand outside of sports. I mean, just look at Stephen A. Smith's new podcast. I would say his podcast is only really 2/3 about sports. Even that sports commentary, I'd say half of it isn't really relevant to the actual play. It more has to do with like beefs, what players say after the game, stuff like that. And seriously, just think about it. One of his most popular videos is literally him talking about Will Smith and Jada.
Jada Pinkett Smith is making news.
And he's not the only one, because you have people like Skip Bayless who also has his own podcast. Now, that's a bit more on the sports side, but he still talks a lot about his personal life and stuff that just isn't relevant to sports. And then you have Barstool, who has literally just become TMZ that just happens to talk about sports once in a while. I mean, what you're watching right now is literally a feed of the most popular Barstool videos on YouTube. Maybe only like 10% of them are actually relevant to sports. And the thing is, especially in the Stephen A. Smith's case, there's nothing really particularly wrong with that. It's just that Antonio Brown takes it to a whole nother level. I mean, just look at some of the stuff he says and some of the crackers he tweets. Some of the stuff is just straight up memes, but a lot of it is just highly disrespectful. But it gets your attention. It gets you to click on it. And then it gets you to look at his content, look at his reporting. And if it ends up being true, all the stuff he's saying, he is going to become one of the most prominent media figures in the NFL. Now, I'll just leave you with this one clip from JJ Redick that sums up where we are right now in sports media.
I can do a video on my podcast where I break down the last 9 games the Pelicans have used Zion Williamson as the primary ball handler and what type of actions that has led to. I looked it up this morning. 54,000 views on YouTube. But I want to call out a coach yesterday. Oh, that gets tens of millions of engagements. That's the ecosystem we live in.